Hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Still fucking pregnant.
Great. Hi, I'm Jordan.
And I'm Sarah, and we're both successful serial entrepreneurs who believe the world is way better with more. More women-owned businesses, more wealth, more magic, and more champagne. But before we can add more, we need to return old business ideas that are taking up too much space in our lives.
Enter The Refund, our content series for folks who are looking to return old storylines, concepts, and habits that no longer serve their life in business. Each episode, we're going to cover one topic, share 3 key takeaways, and we're going to receive a refund on what is no longer fitting the bill. # no receipts required.
Listen and watch The Refund on YouTube and wherever you love to listen to podcasts.
Having a boy or girl?
I'm having a boy.
Interesting.
And you want to know what's interesting? Today we're talking about masculine versus feminine energy.
Yes.
And I've only ever grown penises before.
Okay. Babies, penises.
Well, I think there's something to be said about like the extra surges of testosterone that are flowing through my body when I'm pregnant. Because I'm a lot angrier. And it might just be I'm pregnant and uncomfortable and large and just like tired and over it. But there was a phase with this baby early on where like you're really not feeling that. Obviously your first trimester is a little bit of a struggle fest.
Okay.
For some women, not everyone. I was feeling a little sickly, but I was obsessed with like dark, violent military movies.
Oh!
One after the other, I just was like, the gorier, the better. Show me explosions. Show me a gunfight, which is not my vibe.
Interesting. You're just surging with masculine energy.
I was like surging with masculine energy. And I just was like, aggressive. And anyway, I don't know if that's studied. I don't know.
Well, it was true to your experience.
It was true to my experience, so we don't need to study it because it was real. It was real for me. That's
why I'm also wearing loose camo pants.
Yes.
I was going for a very masculine look. I thought camouflage.
I love that for you.
And loose clothing equals masculine. Yeah. You playful fitted jeans.
I got a high boppy pony up. I'm going to lean into the feminine because this testosterone is still really flowing.
So in a world where I feel like if you're a woman, therefore you're all feminine energy. If you're a man, you're all male energy. I think we return the idea that it can't be one or the other, that you actually kind of need both to balance yourself out. And I think it's a good discussion, a good self-awareness piece.
It's fascinating because in business, similar to in corporate America, we've talked about this, masculine energy has not only dominated, but has won and still continues to win.
Right. It's celebrated. It's almost the norm. It's like what people think they have to morph into
when
to
you
be successful.
Right. When you think of really good leaders, it's, assertive. It's all these words that just so happen to very clearly align with traditional masculine energy, traditional hyper male traits.
Yep.
And we really honor that when boys and men have those abilities. And if girls have those same traits, it's not assertive, it's bossy.
Right.
It's
flipped.
We've seen that time and time again where it's rewarded if a male lives in masculine energy and it is frowned upon if a woman is operating in masculine energy. And
vice versa.
Right? It is not celebrated when males are empathetic or emotional or soft. That's seen as negative.
Weak.
Right. Or there becomes a very inappropriate association with like sexual orientation. Like it just turns into this really weird, unnecessary conversation.
Totally.
That has nothing to do with any of that.
Traits. To me, it's more of traits of how you act and what you're interested in. And I'll never forget when I took a sociology class about gender, sex, and power. It was like one of the most impactful classes I ever took.
Cool.
They talked about the terminology of a tomboy and how that's glorified. And it's because it's a young woman who is just dressing like, has taken on masculine energy. And not in the sense of like being bossy, but like tomboy is glorified, but if a young boy has feminine traits, there's no term for it.
Right. And that's, oh my gosh, that's so fascinating because when I was pregnant with Abel, I went through this really weird phase where I was like, if I had a girl, I would totally dress her in black, brown, blue, khaki, neutrals, monochromes. But I was like, oh, am I going to buy pink for my son? And it made me pause, which I shouldn't have been disappointed in myself, because that doesn't mean that that's my truth, right? But I was really disappointed in the fact that I even questioned. And then I thought critically about what that emotion was. And I thought, well, I don't like that. I don't want to feel, and I shouldn't have to feel, that my son can't wear purple or pink or magenta. And he has all of those colors in his wardrobe.
In his color palette.
In his color palette. And he loves all of the colors and he doesn't think anything of it. And he shouldn't, because, well, first of all, blue and pink as associated with traditional gender roles was invented by marketing in the 50s. It was like a campaign
it's a way to sell products
in the mid-century and the mid-last century. And it was just completely made up. It's completely arbitrary. There is no reality, truth behind it, besides that culturally we've adopted it. And so culturally we can break up with those concepts. But that tomboy concept, that is fascinating.
That sociology class, it blew my mind, because it showed just like this really simple map of where men and women sit just in society, and how, you know, men have more freedom to kind of take risks and do stuff, but women have to stay in this really small bubble. And anything they kind of step out of, it doesn't matter what they do, they're always going to be on the lower half of the graph. It changed the way I looked at the world. And I remember that teacher was like, you are never going to look at people the same way after this class.
And you haven't.
I haven't. And it's so good. And even part of the exercise in the class was, our final project was, you had to do something that wasn't a gender norm. So there was like this very large man who applied to be a waitress at Hooters. He had to do it. I went into Home Depot and I asked if I could rent a jack saw. Is that what it's called? The thing
jackhammer.
Jackhammer. Thank you. I said jackhammer. I talked to my dad beforehand. I said, what would be the things that I say? And I said I was running this project. I was going to have to break the asphalt 24 hours. I don't need it more than 24 hours. And people were shook. And
this I was is fun, especially because you're petite.
Oh yeah, and I was in a skirt, and my shoulder was exposed, and I was like, yes,
a hussy in Home Depot,
right? And I was like, I'll come back and I'll get my truck. And I just remember seeing their
And then
face.
You just never came back?
No.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was the
because you didn't really need the jacket.
No. The asphalt project was wrapped up by then. But it's just that idea of just what happens when you just who's to say a woman can't use a jackhammer to break down her asphalt?
If you scroll enough, you will see a picture of me on Instagram using a jackhammer breaking up the cement at the duplex.
Full circle moment right there.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't rent it. Will rented it, but I used that bitch.
But anyways, I think just understanding gender, and I think sadly our society weaponizes it, and they show you two extremes of when people are overly masculine or overly feminine, and it just gets weaponized and politicized. And I'm not here to talk about people's feelings about that. It's more about the balance. We both have masculine and feminine energy in us, whether we acknowledge it or not, whether we act on it or not. So
totally,
why not either lean into the ones you don't have, lean out of the ones that feel like they're not working for you or you're being forced into it? But that's what we're talking about. It's the energy, not necessarily what you identify as necessarily, right?
Totally.
It's more about how your traits.
That's a good clarifier too. You saying lean in is interesting, because recently I've heard some rumblings of this anti-Sheryl Sandberg lean in movement, because her platform was based on, well, if men can do, and I'm obviously hyper simplifying here, men are doing this, so women just she wasn't as simple as do the same thing, but she literally was lean into it, play the game.
Right.
The men are doing it and succeeding, you can too, which I think again is that pendulum swing of just allowing men to bulldoze women in the workforce isn't the answer, but also the answer wasn't adopting that as the only model. There's a middle ground that allows for feminine energy and masculine energy in any human to play a significant role in their success at navigating the world, both personally and professionally. And frankly, if Sheryl Sandberg hadn't introduced because Lean In took off. I mean, that was a huge movement and very popular story.
There's like groups that still probably exist.
Yeah, there's circles. Yep. Exactly. And this is obviously pre-Me Too. And, you know, a lot of these kind of neo-feminism movements that we see now, Sheryl Sandberg really kind of reignited this energy around that. So had she not introduced that as a concept, we might not even be here today to get to talk about, okay, it's not just women acting in masculine energy. It is both men and women and non-binary humans, right? Playing in both spaces to navigate and strategize their moves as best as they possibly can. Because we each have a little bit.
Yeah. And how many times have we played a part of the boys club? Like
100%.
And there's like,
I will own that.
No, I have too. But just I even think about like the male counterparts. No one's really played a girls club women's game. The fact that if you just called it a girls club just shows how different.
Right. Our natural instincts.
It's the instinct. But like I felt empowered for a long time, kind of like playing the game and being in the boys club. And then you kind of hit a point where you're frustrated because you're working twice as hard, if not harder, and you're playing this game and you don't feel like you're being authentic to yourself. Like, sure, you're rising the ranks.
Right.
But it just like, if it didn't feel intuitive to me, I just kind of feel like, well, why am I really here? Is it because like I'm a woman and you think I'm cute? Do you like actually think I belong in this room? Like there's a couple times it felt really icky to me where I was like, oh, like this isn't, I don't have to do it this way. I don't have to like pretend to be a part of this like very outdated concept of business anymore, because I don't know how else to get to the top.
Yes, I very much so felt that, but I didn't know it in my early 20s when I started my career. And even like comments I would receive about my outfits or like my shoes were sexy. And of course, right?
Shoes are very sexy.
Oh my gosh, foot fetish. Let's just hop on.
Yeah, just the like slight comments that are made to you.
And of course, in my early 20s, my reaction,
nice. Like, confidence, great.
Right, my reaction was probably some like gross giggle and like, thanks. Like I don't even think I realized that I thought that's how I should respond. It was just naturally how I was responding in that moment because that was all that I had ever seen. That was the only reaction I had ever seen. And really it was after I left a corporate setting, because most of my clients, most of my colleagues, my team, we're all women. And I didn't intentionally do that. I didn't say like, I don't want to work with the male demographic. I've had fantastic men that I've worked with and, you know, also worked for. But I didn't realize how refreshing and like, I felt like I shed some yuckiness and it opened my eyes to things I was like, oh, yeah, you don't say that no one should ever say some of those comments in the workplace in general. And two, I don't have to like accept that as a norm if I don't want to. And looking back, there were some, you know, men that were multiple levels above my pay grade making these comments where I didn't feel like I could say anything but something positive.
To jeopardize your relationship and then weaponize it against you. And like that is...
And like...
How often...
I don't want to play that.
Right. And I feel like most women in our life have stories like that. For me, it's like if there wasn't even a thought that they could have sex with me or even just flirt with me, it was like, well, I'm not interested. Or, oh, you're not cute. Like, I don't want to have you on my team. Like, to me, it's super gross. And it's super insane that it's just allowed. And most of them are allowed in like top leadership positions. And they can say and do what they want. Yeah,
clearly like the president of the United States of America. You're the most powerful person in the entire fucking world and you talk publicly about women like that. Like how we don't see that that's a problem. Just, I don't even care what your political affiliation is. Blows my mind.
But it goes back.
It clearly is celebrated.
It just goes back to just like that energy and what's glorified. So I'm curious, do you have like a masculine or more feminine energy you go to more often?
I think I play more frequently in a masculine space than feminine, naturally. Even when it comes to like my initial emotion is anger, like that is a little less soft. That's a little firmer. I'm going to get really angry first. That's the first thing I'm going to tap into. then, and it's not even me tapping into it, that's like the default. And then if I'm like, I don't want to operate in this space, I can dial into this feminine space of, and this is work and this has taken therapy, but what's the real emotion? And then really being nurturing to myself and empathetic to myself. And that's shifting into feminine energy. So I do play in both. And I've never taken, you can take quizzes on this. I've never taken a quiz on this before, but I think I mostly operate maybe like a 60-40, masculine 60%, feminine 40%, maybe 75-25.
I know that Libra, I think feminine is your, for Libras, I'm pretty sure it's a feminine because you're very much like balance and harmony. But
and like sexiness and lush and luxury is like important to Libras.
It's very much, yeah.
And I can fucking spend money and I can hang out at the spa. Like I can do all that stuff. And like I love makeup and doing my hair. And like those are fun things for me too, which is why I think I'm split. But like in business.
Right. How does it show up?
I think I probably start in the masculine space.
Interesting.
And I've really learned that being a good leader, which is not celebrated this way in America and in a capitalistic society, but being a really good leader takes a lot of feminine energy.
Yeah, being a good leader, a
great
people leader,
communication,
is so hard.
listening, and being understanding. And those are my favorite compliments I get from people that have worked for me before of like, you're so empathetic and you're understanding. And like, those are, I think, traits that have helped me in professional leadership roles. And that shit's not celebrated at the top. That's not celebrated in the boardroom. No, unfortunately.
It's easy.
Even though the people love it.
Right. And even it's like people wonder why they have bad leaders. And it's like, well, they're not listening to me. They don't understand. They don't inspire me.
But they're drivers, so it's fine.
Yeah, but they
made the numbers, so it's fine.
Yeah, they have a clear point of, goals to hit. And they're harsh. And it's like, sometimes that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
So
how about you? Do you lean more masculine or feminine?
I would say more masculine, but I think that's a result of any sort of mentor I've had throughout my career have mostly been men.
Same.
Which I've actually, the feminist in me has loved because most of my mentors, if not all, there was never any sexuality tied to it, which is crazy to say out loud because you never know the intention of an older man, especially when you're younger and in your career.
Right.
But it always felt like they were teaching me. They took me under their wing, and they would always step out of the way so I could step in.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably just a comfortability of like mentors that I've had or who I lean towards. Probably your upbringing says a lot. I think in a big Italian family, it's like fight or flight.
Totally.
And I fight. You know what I mean?
You had to.
You know what I mean?
You're fighting for dinner. You're fighting for a pillow.
Right. Fighting for a pillow. Yeah, everything. Fighting for the shower. All the things. So I think it's probably a blend of just upbringing and just like career choice, all of that. But I do think since I started Mend, and I've had kind of more women leaders come into the fold, I've had more feminine energy and I want more of it because there's just like a connection piece that women have that like no one else, no other masculine male energy can have.
Yeah.
Like I just think women are so good at connecting and cultivating relationships and like listening to what you actually need. Like that is so huge. And I want more of that because sometimes I feel like my empathy runs low. I just get so pissed. And I'm like, why aren't you doing it my way?
Right.
Why aren't you just like figure it out? Like it's A to B. And it's like, no, it's not.
There's more to it than that.
Yeah. I would say my husband has a ton of empathy and he's a people leader.
Yes.
But he was also raised by his mom. So he's
also a Libra.
He's also a Libra. And he is very emotionally intelligent. And him and I are almost opposites in that way. And he's such a good sales leader because he's like, people just want to be heard. People just want to be understood. And he's like, when they do something wrong, then that's when I come in. And I'm like, just fire them. And he's like, that's not how it works.
Nice.
He's like, you can't tell somebody to fuck off. I was like, okay.
But I want to.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I can, but you can't. So it is good to also surround yourself with people that are like maybe more feminine, maybe more masculine. Whatever you don't have a lot of, if you want to lean in more to it, they'll teach you how they handle situations. And that's an indicator of how you would handle it.
Yeah.
Like how my husband deals with conflict with his team versus how I deal with it. Totally different.
Yeah.
And neither nor is better or worse.
Right.
But there's
it's just different.
Right. And I very much admire because he manages a big team and people leaders are really, really hard to find.
Right.
Because it's hard. It requires emotional responsibility and intelligence to like carry the weight of what other people are feeling.
And especially ensuring that those people are happy.
Right. And feel content and safe in their job or whatever it is, financially compensated, all of that.
Which data also has shown creates better outcomes in the workplace.
Oh, totally.
Somebody that's just like unhappy and grinding and just driving, like that doesn't produce good work. But a happy person who's invested and passionate, or not even passionate, you don't even need to go to that extreme.
Feels welcomed.
Content was a great word. Maybe it doesn't even need to be happiness, but just contentness is going to produce something that's better.
Totally.
Than somebody who's just like at the grind. And that's what we're seeing now, this big mass resignation, these people leaving, they're leaving the workforce.
Yes,
they're deciding they want more.
Yeah, they don't want to burn themselves. And honestly, there's no dollar amount that will keep people happy if like there are other things they care about are not being served.
Right.
Like the idea of culture is changing, all of that. But I feel like whatever like how to know which energy to use and when. I feel like in a business, I think like feminine energy will reign supreme because that will tell you how someone wants to be treated and understand how they want to be. Because then you may be like, okay, this person wants direct, aggressive, boom, 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 versus this other person this client really wants to go through the process, understand this is an emotional process for them. I think the feminine energy is going to like lead you to figure out which way or what you need to tap into in your business.
I had a really challenging experience this past spring with a client, and it was so hard for me. They were unhappy with something that we delivered. And I very much felt like, well, this is what we talked about. So there was this disconnect. There was a communication breakdown of what they thought they were getting that could not be redone, and what we thought we were delivering that we were really proud of.
Oh, interesting.
And so there were some extremely challenging conversations that happened over that time. And my initial defense mechanism, like through these conversations, I was so afraid. And I was really preparing myself for war.
Oh, interesting.
I was like, better bust out the contract, better get the email. Like
Call my attorney. Yeah,
I was literally
prepared.
like building my front line.
Yep.
And what transpired over the numerous conversations that needed to happen was so cool. And it was, even though conversations did get emotional and heated, looking back on how we collectively resolved that conflict, it was so in beautiful feminine energy of we're in this together. We're going to figure this out together. And not every conversation felt that way, because they're having to represent their side and speak their truth, and I'm having to represent my side and speak my truth. There was just so much. We got to a point of just so much respect in like, okay, Sarah, we can see why you thought that. And okay, I can see why the client thought that. And we were able to come up with, we spoke our truths, and then we decided, okay, now it's time to move on. And like, how can we resolve this together? And it wasn't aggressive. No one was being overly assertive or vocal or accusing. There was no ego involved. And we just worked together really hard to make the best of what ultimately was a super shitty situation. And
it took empathy and understanding.
It took so much empathy and patience. And patience was key, because there were a lot of nights where I just didn't sleep because I felt terrible. I just was like, this is a yucky experience. I don't like what's happening. I don't like that I have to be here. I hate that they're disappointed. I'm a woo. I felt very unable to woo. And it was really challenging in the moment. But looking back, I'm so very grateful for that experience, because it proved to me that conflict can be resolved softly and gently.
It's not a war. Not all conflict's a war. Like, I'm a true, but that is like feminine energy that like, I believe most conflict can be resolved with a phone call. So I always tell people, like, don't send an email. Like, email is always misinterpreted, and I think it's dumb to have a paper trail.
And people like assume
negative intent.
Tone.
It's like always just like, hey, let me give you a call.
Let's just talk through it.
It's like we're all people at the end of the day. It's all like everything can be resolved. That's so interesting.
It was really fascinating. We still work together. Like, everything was totally fine. So to me, it was just a really beautiful learning and a really good exercise of leaning into feminine energy
and the communication's
and letting that
key.
lead, and the communication's key, and just like letting that lead that portion of my business.
I love that. my similar story but different was I went into a project with like really masculine energy, and the client needed feminine energy. And when I had to kind of transform during the project, and it was so, because I wasn't like in the right mindset, I was so emotionally drained after a couple sessions. That,
because
like,
you had to step into feminine energy and you weren't planning on
correct. Yep.
Got it.
Because I just I didn't think about it that way. I didn't really understand the challenges that were going on and how to resolve it. And the masculine way wasn't going to work. It had to be approached in a more patient, communicative, open, kind of like flow of like, hey, instead of just, because going in head first did not work. So it was more of a emotionally exhausting for me, not for them. They felt heard. But that's because I had to like transform into this.
Interesting.
And I just remember there was a couple times after some meetings where I was like, I got to sit in a bath and like decompress, because that was very emotionally exhausting, because I didn't think that was going to be the way I operated in that project.
That is really fascinating. This is kind of sparking, oftentimes branding is such an emotional experience for my clients. I wonder if that's why I lead with a little bit of masculine energy to help balance those emotions.
Yep, to let them know that's part of the process.
Exactly. Like, this can just be very factual. You need this. You need this. This will help you.
Right.
And guide them through that process in a little bit more like neutral ground that's a little more solid, a little more maybe strategic, a little less emotional, because they are bringing so many emotions to the table.
Right. And I bet it's probably really hard for people with masculine energy to understand, like, what's the ROI?
Oh my God, the number one question.
It's funny because, like, what a like direct, we need an A to B correlation. So very interesting how it shows up in different parts of the business. And like, again, I think how you know when to use it is it's going to come down to just how your clients are responding. Do they want direct, clear, like it's very factual what they need, or do they want to be heard and understood? Do they want to be along for the emotional part of the process? And like, I think a big part of client work is the relationship, and you have to know how to communicate with them, or else it's just not going to work. It doesn't matter what your deliverables are, like it's the relationship.
It feels like we just did an episode on sales and how sales don't have to feel schemy and sleazy and nasty.
Yes.
Sales, to me, based off of some of the traits that we identified in that episode, really do align with more masculine energy. Straightforward, direct, assertiveness, confidence. And then I think about the next step in my process. I mean, even like coordinating the contract and confidently speaking of the contract, those are traditionally more male,
and what the
masculine energy. Owning what you're worth, asking for that dollar amount. Those are, I would continue to connect to masculine energy. Then I think once they're in the door and I'm having my first call with my client, and this is when I'm really cracking into vulnerability. I need to understand trust, a lot of communication, some softness. Like, to me, that's probably where I really transition into feminine energy, making them feel safe. Creating a space where they can be vulnerable and communicate with me. I need them to really quickly give me feedback and not feel bad about it, right? I need them to trust, like, okay, Sarah's got this. I can tell her that idea sucks, which no one ever tells me. Or or like they just are like, Sarah, this is amazing. Can we tweak this or whatever, right? Like, we need to build a ton of emotional connectedness in those moments to quickly get done. And so in my flow, I'm really seeing, okay, I'm really starting in a masculine space for the upfront part of business, which again, data shows us is very successful when that's led with masculine energy. It's what's been celebrated for the since the inception of America. And then I lean into this feminine space, and that helps me build connection with my clients that ultimately makes a successful relationship. So that's just a silly example, but a very real example of how both have
contextualizes it.
Yes, it has a place to lean into both.
Right. And neither or is bad. I think it's, again, it's like, it's with anything. It's like, you have to have some self-awareness, read the room. What does the situation need? Like, what does this need right now? And I know for those who are lean more masculine, we resist the urge to have empathy and like feel feelings, because it's like easier to just plow through. And then if we're feminine, too feminine energy, we sometimes belittle ourselves.
You don't want to be assertive. You don't want to own it.
We just will let people walk all over us. So just know that, like, just know when to step in and when you're feeling resistance.
I'm going to ask a question that I don't necessarily know the answer to. I don't know if you know the answer either. Are there like any tools or resources that you've heard of or that you know that can help, like, flex a masculine energy
Ooh,
muscle
that's a
or
good
flex a
question.
feminine energy muscle? Because I feel like that's something that would really benefit someone,
bet.
especially if they feel like they were struggling. Because I feel like both what you and I are speaking to right now is having relatively good balance between the two, or at least we know when to turn on and off. And I think what I'm sensing is that's served us well in our businesses, right? Like
think
that's been
so.
helpful for us. So I don't know
I
of,
don't know either.
okay, maybe we can do a little research and include in the show notes a couple things that maybe there isn't anything. I don't know.
I think a good takeaway tied to that is like, if there's not like direct correlation of resources to it, it's like surround yourself with people that have different types of masculine or feminine.
I love that.
Whatever you don't have, maybe surround yourself with somebody who is more of that, so you can learn from them. I would say start with your people. Right?
I think that also goes back to your A team, building your Avengers. We have an episode on that in their first season. And so for me, when I'm building, like literally when I'm building my team, my first hires have these strengths that I don't have.
Correct. You want people different.
I
than
wanted
you
people that
to
were better at
challenge
me
you.
than these other things because somebody needed to do them in the business and it wasn't going to be me.
You're like, not it.
Literally, that's how I offload everything. I'm like, I don't want to do that anymore. Somebody else needs to do it. It's because those are the things I'm not good at. So why am I going to muscle through, right? So I have found a lot of success in hiring people who are really great at the things that I am not good at. And I let them just run with it and do it and be good at it. And I wonder if that masculine and feminine energy bit is a good example of that. If you really lead in masculine energy and you have a really hard time stepping into feminine energy,
Bring people in that have
maybe
that.
you bring some people on your team that have feminine energy to create some balance, to learn from them. Like that feels like a smart move.
Very similar
to help.
to the know thyself. Have self-awareness. I think one, like, bring in people who are to help you balance yourself out so you can learn from them and vice versa. You could probably teach them a thing or two.
That doesn't even need to apply to only masculine or feminine energy.
No,
that could
just
apply
in
to obviously
general.
like anything.
Right. Just people that can help balance you out, but that always starts with self-awareness. That would be one. I would say, I mean, you have to have both and like learning to like step into
I think
one
that's
or the
future.
other. Yeah. For sure. You're going to have both and learning when to step into one or step back. Like and that's just self-awareness. And I think my goal for this year is to really embrace more of that like feminine energy and really lean into understanding and giving people the space instead of like just like drilling right into business, because that doesn't always work.
I like that. And to me, the third is honoring the reality that, especially as a founder, of a small business or even a founder of something that's really grown, leading with emotion is okay.
Totally. It means you care.
It means you care. There's this like, oh my God, don't cry. Like think about those like reviews or those meetings that you've had with your boss or your
you're like,
office.
Don't cry.
Like, oh my God, all that's doing is showing that you're a fucking human being that's not a goddamn
care.
robot.
Yeah, and that
that
someone
you're
didn't tell
invested.
you. Yeah, that something was going on.
And so, let's not go crazy here and just like cry all day at our desks. That might be an indication that something's wrong.
I was just going to say, that sounds like therapy.
Sounds like a red flag. But I think there's something to be said.
Yes, or if you feel angry, feel angry.
Feel the
and
feelings.
Then just like course correct
and
as needed.
let yourself process that. And I think accepting that that's okay, because, we say all the time, like, make business as emotionless as possible, or like, don't take this personally, grow thick skin.
Yeah.
We have these concepts that just feel so kind of like cheesy slogans.
Yeah.
And a lot of those, again, are based off of traditional masculine energy, which has historically made for successful business people, again, in small business and in corporate America. And we've cut off at the knees this concept that you can be an emotional being and run a successful business.
Yeah, and the idea of thick skin is just funny to me. It's like, I understand some things are challenging, but you get to decide how to respond to them. My response isn't to just like pretend it's not there and just shield every negative experience.
Exactly.
Like, let's just deal with it. It's okay that it hurt my feelings and that I was angry because I cared. And this was something that I, cared about and I wanted them to be happy. So
it's hard because it's like, I agree, don't take it personally. But that doesn't mean don't be emotional.
Right.
That doesn't mean
Those
don't
are two
have an
different
emotion.
things.
It's two different things. And I think sometimes we've or like,
we interpret it.
We interpreted it like, oh, have thick skin, or don't take it personally.
Be a robot.
Be a robot. No, it means it probably doesn't have much to do with you as a person. It's just like with that client, that wasn't a personal attack on me.
No, it was about the work.
It was
and
about the work. It was about a
miscommunication.
miscommunication,
Totally.
and both parties were able to own up to that. To me, that is the exact way that conflict resolution needs to happen.
Totally.
We were all having an emotional reaction. That's totally normal. We're humans. There's a lot of skin in the game. There's a lot of money in the game.
Totally.
It was challenging, but when I was really able to pull myself out of that and not take that as an attack on who I am as a human being, even though I do associate a lot of my worth to my business and my success, I could have an emotional moment and then we could troubleshoot. And so again, I think that's a good example of leaning into both. And it is okay to have an emotional reaction to something. And that doesn't mean it's a personal attack on who you are.
Totally. Hashtag emotions are welcome.
Emotions are welcome. Did you just invent a new hashtag for us? That's good. That's good.
Cool.
I like that.
Me too.
That was a good one. What are you going to do the rest of the day today? Are you going to lean into feminine or masculine, do you think? I'm going to take a nap. So I think
was just going to say, that feels very masculine of you to do nothing.
I'm going to lean into baby energy.
Okay, follow us on all the things, all the places, Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can watch us on Spotify and YouTube. That's
if you haven't been watching on Spotify, I've heard that
can.
people have just been listening. If you are listening to
can
this,
watch us on there.
There is some place that you can tap and actually see our faces. Hi,
We're
here we
on
are.
there.
It's pretty cool that you can watch on both Spotify and on YouTube.
Yes.
And the biggest thing that we ask of you is if you can subscribe and follow. Those are two big helpers of letting the podcast grow and helping us reach more people just like you who appreciate the stories we're telling and the advice we're chatting through.
Yeah, tell your friends. Cool.
Okay, let us know too, masculine or feminine.
Yeah, which one do you lean in on?
Yeah, I'm interested to find out.